The best rivalries are rarely those with brothers, sisters, next door neighbours. The best rivalries, particularly in this wild old world of sports, are those that crop up organically. For over a century, New Zealand versus Ireland was a procession, a dominant black machine, the best team in the world almost always, versus a middling side who'd never beaten them once. And then, 8 years ago, for the first time ever, Ireland did it. And in one moment, turned a fairly bog-standard fixture that takes place and everyone goes, oh yeah, that was fine, into a grudge match. Ireland's previous white whale became the benchmark they marked everything against, whilst New Zealand took on a new team they hated losing to the most. And in that moment, every match between these two became a must-watch. Friday night gave us another chapter in rugby's most recent elite-level rivalry. The All Blacks winning in Dublin for the first time in 8 years. One of their longest ever winless streaks at an international ground, leaving Ireland scratching their heads. So, we must ask, how did the All Blacks end their Dublin hoodoo? What was off about Ireland? And how does it set both teams up for the next few weeks? And perhaps whenever they next meet. Maybe it's a hot take, but I kind of loved this game. I enjoyed it immensely. Ireland and New Zealand are kind of the most difficult teams to talk about on this channel, other than Wales, but that's for very different reasons, because they're so consistent. Not Wales. Typically giving the same exceptional performance at the same unbelievable level every single week, barely changing what they do. And yet this Friday night, both teams found themselves in a match where their usual crisp, clinical style wasn't possible through tiny bits of weather, timing, circumstance, and occasion, but largely just how bloody well these two teams now know each other and are motivated to beat each other. We were served up a game where neither side was able to play their usual style. Defensive pressure, physicality, and bespoke tactics, creating an entirely different occasion for both teams, the pair left needing to adapt. This was Test rugby at its most Darwinian. Ireland's usual game is built around regular shapes, everyone knowing their lines all called and pulled off on the fly. However, it begins with front football. Ireland like to attack the same areas over and over again, stressing defenders repeatedly. The idea to create a paper cut and then use increasingly creative Kurosawa-esque samurai moves with that sheet of A4 on the same chunk of flesh over and over until the entire arm just falls off. Ireland's game is designed to exploit any tiny gaps in a retreating defence, targeting same defenders over and over again. It's built to turn one good carry into 1,000 great carries. The team has an enormous range of starter plays designed to be ran off scrum or line out, usually just there to open up a weak shoulder or make a defender second guess so they can get a good solid carry against them and generate some fast ball to then set up more of that fast phase play. And so, just as in the World Cup, New Zealand identified the best way to keep hold of their arm, which they really want to do, they love their arm, is to do everything they can to prevent Ireland making that paper cut in the first place. This became a three-step process. The easiest way to stop Ireland from getting front foot ball is just to not give them any opportunities at all. As such, New Zealand primarily kicked in-field to deny Ireland any line-outs to play off. The All Blacks were required to exit their own 22 14 times on Friday and looked for a touch just twice. 3 if you count the time Caleb Clark's clearly aiming to keep it in field, but this is a bit of the game that isn't be big and fast, so he skewers it and put it out on the full. Around the rest of the field, there was no tennising down the tram lines, just high balls and stress kicks, with Clark and Talea doing a great job of chasing and then just lobbing themselves in the air, taking the springbok tactic of get yourself in the eye line instead of going for the ball, causing huge pressure and forcing knock-ons without ever really threatening to win it themselves. This was combined with incredible discipline, conceding just 5 penalties over the full match, and 4 of those came whilst defending around the 22-metre mark, where Robertson clearly gave his team more licence to macaw it up. The squeaky clean approach over 70% of the field, denying Ireland any easy chance to work up field to gain those launch pads to kick for territory and win those lineups further up the pitch. And as such, with the black being whiter than white, it gave them more wiggle room with the referee once the pressure was really on. Step 2 came at the set piece itself. The scrum became an increasing weapon the longer the game went on, but the line out caused nightmares from the very beginning, clean stealing free throws, as in the number, we're not talking about basketball. Knowing Ireland rarely maul around halfway, they could afford to always chuck someone up in the air. Here, Scott Barrett makes a point of letting Tyke Byrne know he's cracked their code, meaning when Byrne shifted to lift McCarthy McCarthy instead, Barrett can jump straight up in the air and be up in front of the intended jumper, Tupovae providing a fantastic lift. And the exact inverse here, as reading the play, Barrett and Vi recognise Ireland's better prepared pod here is going to out-crab them, so shift who's jumping and who's lifting to get Vi in the air instead. We often talk about halfbacks or centre partnerships having psychic connections, but Barrett and Vi clearly have some sort of sixth sense in how each other operate at the set piece and steal both these lineouts without a word to each other. Even when they didn't steal it, New Zealand did such a good job of disrupting the ball. Here they just chuck both their locks up in the air and it forces Ryan to lean back enormously, taking the ball off balance and beyond the 15-metre mark, meaning the lineout's over and hence the All Black defence can advance. Archie makes a really good carry given everything, but it's given New Zealand that extra second to wrap around and get around the corner, having the numbers in place to put a bandage over that paper cut. No NZ runner is watching two men. Everyone is numbered up properly, meaning everybody can just line up their guy, allowing Satiti to force a knock on from McCarthy, the ball recovered by Tupovae, who, in the space of 6 seconds, I want to take a second to look at this, or 6 of them, jumps at a line out, hits a ruck, then makes a really good carry on the far side of the pitch from the line out. I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it until people listen. This kid is world class and we need to stop sleeping on him. Because this was the real essence of what the All Blacks did on Friday. The tactical shift cut Ireland's chances to a minimum, but the really impressive aspect was how the All Blacks fronted up when the Green Gang did get those opportunities. Ireland had, over the full 80 minutes, 14 chances to launch a starter play. That's any scrum or line out where they won the ball and didn't just keep it in the set piece. And yet, Ireland only crossed the game line on 6 of those 14. This, off the only preventable penalty New Zealand gave away all day, is about as clean ball as they won over the full match. NZ don't crack the codes, they just fire Surveyor up at the front to put the thrower and jumper off, yet Ireland win it cleanly, JGP bulleting it into midfield. And so Ireland run a fairly simple play. Van der Fleer and Archie, arguably the two biggest carriers, are both options, but switch lines at the last second to throw the defence off, but New Zealand just don't care. They shoot up as fast as they humanly can, Barrett actively accelerating at Archie, while Kane provides a bumper, stopping him inches out from the game line. Barrett then does a beautiful job of rolling away in a fashion that isn't penalisable, but does slow the ball down, allowing a full 13-player Kiwi line to be up in the Irish faces. Ireland run a little tip-on line to isolate Amua, but it actually works against them. Lomax keeps wrapped on Doris, preventing him from double jobbing onto the clear, and it allows Satiti to get in over the ball and win the turnover. If Ireland make a paper cut that first phase, Satiti has a further yard to jog backwards, and Doris can get there in time. But without it, penalty black. Similar case studies can be found on near enough every phase of Ireland's first scrum here. Players are literally in starting block positions like sprinters to explode up as fast as possible. And sure enough, they get Bundy to ground pretty much immediately. Or here, the work rate of Ratimer and Kane to fill in the space as Archie cuts back in. The scrum half making a very cheeky slap of the ball with his hand to win it back for the All Blacks. Exactly the kind of thing you can only get away with if you're squeaky clean around most of the field. Because the sheer importance of these phases of stopping them first up is just highlighted by what happened when Ireland did get that front foot ball. I don't think Friday was a case of rust or being off song, because when the Irish did get those chances to go forward, when they did sneak that momentum from the All Blacks, they were, frankly, themselves. Ireland scored points off 4 of their 6 bursts of momentum, with the other 2 resulting in this penalty, which could have been kicked, but they opt for the corner instead, and this long sequence of phases, which may well have resulted in points as well, if not for an incredible turnover by Ardy Surveyor after countless dozen phases. The net result of those 4, 3 penalties, and of course, the first try of the game, scored right after half-time by Josh van der Fleer. Within inches of the try line, there's almost no team better than Ireland. Farrell's side are so good at pinning players on the floor, elongating rucks, creating tiny traps of forwards to deplete their opposition lines, and yet, in this try, there's almost none of that. Ireland instead know how physical the Kiwis are and look to catch them out with pace and angles instead. After this first carry by Doris, every Irish runner bar one follows the same trajectory, wrapping around the corner, working outwards, entering the eye-line late, prompting the defender to drift out, at which point they snap back inwards, working against the grain to hit a weaker shoulder. It's really smart and allows for some fantastic game line, most notably Porter here, almost driving over the line himself. However, the follow-up is even smarter yet. With plenty of All Black numbers on their feet, Gibson Park lobs it wide to Byrne, who can carry straight into the furthest out forward, with Mackenzie here, fly half, watching his opposite man Crowley. Numbers sucked in, Mackenzie folds out, and only 2 forwards get around the corner, and it leaves the pair watching the ruck, spread from Williams, who's moved into a wider channel. Noticing Satiti's brief ball watching, Van der Fleer looks up and runs that same out to in line, entering his eye line so late, knowing only Williams is watching for him, so he can ride that tackle where Satiti won't get low enough fast enough to prevent him getting over the try line. Because from there, it's a brilliant finish. The shoulder protecting the ball, yet it's out in front, line always in his sights. It's a try finished by someone who's used to scoring tries, who knows how to finish in these situations. It's a specialist's move. And ultimately, it's a superb 5-pointer, 7-pointer in the end. Perfectly worked. The issue on Friday night wasn't that Ireland weren't executing at their usual level, it's that they couldn't. And then, once they couldn't, they struggled to adapt. The Irish have so many variations of the plan A that they can usually lean on over and over again, reach into the bag and pull out a different plan A, and just swap out a new version if it isn't working, that they've never really needed a plan B under Farrell. And as such, that lack of it led to some fractures in how they deal with the situation. Jack Crowley, while still in the field, stripped back their game in response, playing a more simple, straight-up phase play style to try and generate the momentum first before playing later, and yet that momentum almost never came. Whereas Kieran Frawley, when he replaced him, reverted to type and started pulling the usual system, trying to play it on the back foot, and the All Blacks ate it up. This is slow ball, going backwards, with the All Black defence perfectly set, but Frawley goes for a complicated phase shape anyway. With more defenders and attackers in situ, 3 have already lined up Henderson, and it leaves him smashed and the ball knocked on. And yet I also think Ireland aren't getting enough credit for what they did do in this game. Because in defence, they were frankly exceptional, incredibly physical, and adjusted to what they knew the All Blacks were going to do brilliantly. Just as the Irish game is about momentum, the All Black attack is so stacked on top of their ability to generate fast ball. And we saw the Irish just chucking uncharacteristic amounts of players into breakdowns, looking for Jack was so much more than usual. This, of course, is helped by the fact there were 16 Josh van der Fleers on the park, a conservative estimate, but it slowed the All Black ball to a crawl, and their physicality just did the rest. Just as New Zealand cancelled out Ireland's attack, Ireland shut New Zealand down, denied them opportunities, denied them fastball, and denied them chances. The difference, however, the thing that won the game, is how the two teams responded. Where Ireland felt unsure how to adapt their usual systems when they were no longer working, the Kiwis remained calm. The All Blacks adapted their kicking game. They kicked more on Friday night than in both the Bledsoe games this season put together, and whilst it was still fewer than any of their 3 tests against England under Robertson, they kicked for more metres in this test than any game they've played all year. Kicking, generally, when stuff is working for them, is used as a reset, a new chance to get back up the field and start the attack again. But on Friday, it became more about territory than the attack. The All Blacks having an overlap like this and not running might seem uncanny, bizarre, out of character, but it reflects the way they'd adapted the game they knew they were in and were playing to those circumstances. The team remained entirely patient, holding their nerve because they knew a chance would come at some point. And if they remained diligent and disciplined and alert, one chance might be all they'd need. And sure enough, they took it. In the end, scored by the ever-grateful hands of Will Jordan. It begins with a really smart kick. With New Zealand having looked long all day, Frawley has set deep here, and Roygaard instead hangs it shallow, forcing the fly-off to sprint some 40 metres to get to the ball, with Talea chucking himself in the eye line, prompting that knock-on. New Zealand kick again on the front foot now, and whilst loaded incredibly well, it leaves the ruck in line with the last scrum location, and hence allowing the full Kiwi pack to get up and into Doris, catching him behind the gain line before making an utter mess of the breakdown. In order to prevent a turnover, Doris pops it off the floor to JGP, who slams it onto Frawley. It's a harried, rushed kick, and Hansen is unable to get under it, the ball falling instead for Geordie Barrett. Now, much has been made of the new no blockers rule these last few weeks, but Wallace Satiti here decides to take his chances. He steps quite clearly into Rob Herring's way, opening up a gap for Barrett. Geordie takes it and keeps NZ on the front foot, the side working it out to the touchline as Jordan throws a risky offload to Ioane. Herring, having worked all the way back, makes a tackle, and it allows Mackenzie quick ball to play off. Looking to condense the Irish line, he hits a forward pod in the midfield and drifts around onto the short side, the pop pass taking out a second defender. It's a great tackle by Doris, but Ireland haven't reacted beyond that. Mackenzie scans the Irish defence he wraps around, and he makes a genius read. Finlay Bealham, a semi-injured, mostly knackered prop, is now stood in the 13 channel. Most backs, most fly halves, if they spot this, will look to take him on or invite a runner onto his outside, challenge him directly, but Mackenzie goes full 4D chess. Eddie Jones probably jealous and proud. Instead of targeting Bealham directly, he drifts out to square up on Lowe, the only guy outside him. If the winger comes in to take him early, it'll leave Bealham alone to defend the wide channel, with Lowe now essentially out of the game. And that's exactly what happens. Lowe bites, and his quick hands leave Surveyor against Keenan, with Talea on the outside. Bealham totally unable to keep up. This is a brilliant effort by Porter to close off the space, and an even better tackle by Keenan, and it leaves the All Blacks 5 metres out from the line, and this is where things begin to change. Mackenzie makes another superb read ended up set a huge range of options in midfield incredibly quickly, and this little double pump invites the Irish defence up on them. When running wide plays all day, Mackenzie's done this sort of thing, right? He'd normally hit a forward who then goes in behind, who then plays it wide right out, but instead he just lobs it right to Satiti on the outside of Archie, which forces Frawley inwards. The flanker just about gets it away, knowing that matters more than accuracy, allowing Amua to scoop it up and deliver an absolute seed to Jordan for him to score in the corner. However, the key difference in this try actually comes a few moments earlier with one of the most baffling individual defensive decisions we'll see all autumn. As that ball goes wide and Keenan comes up, Mac Hansen, who should be the winger on the side Jordan scores on, starts jogging back to fill in at fullback behind Keenan, who's coming to the main line, and it leaves him on this side alongside Lowe, and hence his wing undefended. This is a system play, it happens. Gibson Park has filled in on the wing, Ireland have accounted for it. However, what they haven't accounted for is Gary Ringrose, the 13, going to do exactly the same thing. Instead of bouncing out and letting his forwards fill the gaps here, he comes in to act as the guard, even pushing Byrne out so he can be in tighter. He has plenty of time to look up, see this, and jog back into his 13 position outside Archie, or even fill in for Archie and force Archie out one. But no, he comes in tight with no need at all, and it leaves the 13 channel totally undefended. If Ringrose is here, first off, the mispass probably never comes, but even if it does, there's no way the ball gets beyond Almua. Him and Frawley able to team up and smother, eat the space effortlessly. It's an enormous and totally out-character brain fart from Ringrose that cost them a try. It's the sort of poor defensive read that if anyone else in green did it, you'd go, well, if Ringrose was playing, he never would have done this. This try never would have happened. But ultimately, this was a game so tight, so tough, so hard fought. The fatigue, the pressure, the brain fog caused by 70 minutes of top-tier Test rugby, getting to one individual Irish player for literally 4 or 5 seconds is enough to cost Ireland the match. This was probably a really important game for Ireland. The emotion of being scarcely able to perform, to fire a shot at home in front of a crowd that literally has Paul Mescal in it, will bring things into sharp focus. Ireland next face an Argentina side who were able to silence New Zealand and beat them in New Zealand earlier this year, and it'll hopefully provide a brilliant opportunity to stress test some of those alternatives, some of that tasty plan B, because New Zealand have kind of shown the world how you beat them. Be smart, be physical, be patient, and hope they haven't yet discovered something to go alongside all those plan A's. And yet, I think it also showed us more than that. Friday night might have been the moment we found out who this New Zealand team truly are. Up until now, they felt a little bit like the All Blacks coached by Scott Robertson. It was broadly the same feeling as before under Foster and Hansen and Henry. A similar game plan ideas, just with the odd new emphasis every now and again when they spoke. But Friday night's performance felt like the moment they became Scott Robertson's All Blacks for the first time. A clear identity manifesting in the image of their scrappy, honest, intelligent, and detail-oriented, ambitious coach. It's the kind of performance that makes me so much more excited to watch and indeed talk about this team over the coming years. New Zealand have become a scrappy, smart, competitive team who always adapt, who can play any style the game forced them to, and that was too much for their most recent rivals this Friday night. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That is our second video of a very busy week. There were about 286 internationals this weekend. We're covering, I think, 14 of them in total.
Yeah.
So we have this, obviously, out here. We'll be looking at England, Australia on this channel in the next few days. We started a second channel called More Squid Rugby a couple of months ago to look at other games, kind of, in slightly lighter detail, but still hopefully in some reasonable detail.
And up there already is us talking about Wales versus Fiji for half an hour.
What a great time that is. We dig into
it.
The Costello substitution, what Gatland could have done differently, what Fiji did well. We've also then looked at all the other games that will be going up in a big roundup in the next few days, some point before the weekend.
So that's everything from Scotland versus South Africa, all the way down to UAE versus Zimbabwe.
Which was a great game.
Yes,
and well worth keeping an eye out for. Zimbabwe have some really interesting wingers. That's all coming up very soon. There's more on the channel. We've got a video on Warren Gatland that you may want to have a look at. May have aged slightly different. There's one Scott Robertson as well that links thematically into this one. Have a look around, please, and we'll see you soon for more rugby.
Here, look at this ball from Tupuwai. Oh, yes, boy!